most popular video games of all time, Nintendo's Super Mario Brothers, into a feature film?
Do you know what I love about mud? It's clean and it's dirty at the same time.
So there's a new Mario movie in the works. Yeah, enter your Chris Pratt as cast here jokes. I think it looks pretty good though. Admittedly, it's just based off a teaser, so not much information there. But as far as a Mario movie goes, it looks a lot better than I'd expect coming from Illumination. But this is pretty significant, since Nintendo has notoriously had a recent history of being stingy with their properties. I mean, the movie looks pretty good, but all we have to go by is just one single scene. I thought that we'd go back in time, though, and re-examine the reason they became so cynical with the use of their characters in the first place. The 1993 Super Mario Bros. Movie. A movie that has a, shall we say, less than stellar reputation.
I'm alright. Monkey!
It was a total disaster in 1993, flushed out the door, and had its lunch eaten by Jurassic Park. Everybody who worked on the set of the movie said they hated working with the directors, Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel, and whose subsequent major careers went to a screeching halt. Yeah. But here's the thing, I think in my older, positive, more outlook on entertainment and media, I'm here to tell you guys, the Super Mario Brothers movie is actually a pretty good movie. To start, let's talk about my history with the film. Growing up like any young kid from the 90s/early 2000s, there were two things in life I was really a big fan of. Going to the video store and playing video games. Now naturally when you combine those two, you usually get solid gold, right? No. Video game movies have long had a very, very poor reputation. I mean, when you got masterpieces like the Double Dragon movie, Street Fighter Legend of Chun-Li, or the Dead and Alive movie that might as well not exist. Who can blame the critics for being so cynical? However, when you look upon the worst video game movie lists, there's usually one film that you can often sometimes still find in said lists. I'm here to dispel the notion that the Super Mario Bros. Movie is one of the worst video game movies ever, or that it was ever one of the worst to begin with. Naturally, because it's the first, it had no direct competition until Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat came along. However, even in its flawed state, I still think this Super Mario Bros. Movie is one of the better video game movies out there. In fact, it might be one of my favorite video game movies, period. Yes, there's stuff that doesn't work. Oof! And as an actual adaptation of the games, it's a downright disaster. However, if taken on its own terms, it's actually a pretty enjoyable movie, with a lot of interesting satirical elements that you'd expect from the creators of Max Headroom, some fun performances, and a Blade Runner-esque dystopian nightmare of an aesthetic that I really appreciate. They even hired the production designer of that film, David L. Snyder, to work on the movie. I'm not here to change your opinions of the movie. I am over here to provide an alternate source from all the negativity that sees this movie as some sort of black sheep of the Mario family. The thing to know about the Super Mario Bros. Movie is that adapting video games, especially back then in a narrative feature film, was always going to be a Herculean challenge. Older video games back then, especially by their nature outside of ambitious RPGs, did not support big plots. So most video games just resorted to simple tasks and objectives. Link has to rescue the princess, Sonic has to save some birds from an evil maniacal man, and so on. This is why I feel special sympathy for the screenwriters who had to work on the 1993 Mario movie, and even the ones currently working on the new Mario movie. It's not an easy property to adapt, especially if you're not pulling from the more plotty RPGs in this series, which at the time of the film's release didn't even exist. What do you do with a series in 1983 that is largely stuck to the classic big fat Italian man saves a princess from a fiery dragon archetype? Well, apparently you go in a completely different direction. Naturally, some of the changes are very confusing. If not interesting, Luigi's not Mario's adopted son. At least the film seems to imply it. It's Princess Peach, not Princess Daisy, which confused me even as a kid. Keep in mind, this is before the actual Princess Daisy had yet to be reintroduced in the video games, and I never played Super Mario Land as a child. Toad's not a guitar player, Yoshi isn't that realistic of a dinosaur, and the Goombas don't look like somebody kept mushrooms on the stove too long and let them simmer out. But here's the thing, even with those changes, that actually makes this version of the Mario universe even more inherently interesting to me. It's like somebody saw the Mario games and was like, we need to heighten that even more, make it more expressive, and just supremely over the top. And the movie, for all of its flaws, does make many references to the original games. So it's not like the filmmakers didn't do their homework. They just took things in much different, darker directions. In addition to Goombas and Yoshi, the movie also includes Bomb-Bombs, or Bob-Bombs, as the movie seems to pronounce them, Sniffets, Bullet Bills, and Big Bertha, among other things. It's an interesting mix of Mario elements with a story that is way more slapdash in tone than what you might expect from a Mario property, and especially for audiences at the time going to the cinema. It actually makes for a very interesting assortment. For this occasion of video, I watched the original work print cut that was submitted for free on the Internet Archives, titled Super Mario Bros. The Morton Jago Cut. It has all the hallmarks of a typical work print cut, unfinished effects, the opening is literally just stock footage of claymation dinosaurs, for example, stock music, obvious incomplete audio, and shortened and extended lines and sequences. So it doesn't change the movie a whole lot in terms of presentation or tone, just makes it longer. Most of the changes were probably done for the better. However, there are two interesting deleted scenes I'd like to note. One of them is right at the beginning, involves the Mario Brothers meeting with Scapelli's goons. Scapelli is a minor antagonist in the film, who serves as a capitalistic rival to the Mario's own plumbing business. He's quickly pushed aside as his only function is to get the main plot of the film moving. In a deleted scene, Mario throws across a tossed-off line that he and Scapelli may have known each other since they were kids, implying they could have either been classmates or even friends. This brings up an interesting what-if dynamic for the film. Maybe Scapelli's character in rivalry with Mario could have been expanded upon, or maybe the film could have paralleled that with Bowser. The other involves Mario and Luigi bickering as they approach the canyons. It does something that I think, even as a defender of this movie, the film could have done more of, which is to have Mario and Luigi actually act like real siblings. After they arrive in the Dino World, that stuff is quickly pushed a step aside for alternate antics. In 1993, around the time of the film's release, co-director Morton Jankel said in an interview with Starlog, describing the film and changes to the source material as such, "We weren't familiar with the games, but we knew how obsessed with it people would become, so our challenge was what to keep and what to omit. Since we obviously couldn't use all the game elements, that would have been too much, we had to create a logic line that would run throughout the world of the film. So we took Dino World as our basic landscape, the Mushroom Kingdom, the fireball weaponry of the game. We took 34 of the game's main characters, but went on to create additional ones." Whether or not you agree with these changes is one thing, but I think that's a good description of the film. Taken on its own, it's a terribly disappointing adaptation of the Mario games, but I think it works even better as a separate dimension-hopping adventure. Maybe people would think even better of it if it didn't have the Mario name, but it's also hard to argue that if it didn't have the Mario name, I wouldn't even be here making a video defending the movie in the first place. As it is, it's another in a long line of failed Hollywood adaptations that I stick up for. I have a thing or two for creatively ambitious fantasy adventure failures. It's kind of my thing, and the Mario movie is no exception. Honestly, there's probably a lot more I could talk about this movie. In fact, if I really went down and analyzed the film, I'm sure that there's a lot of characters and plots and plot holes and other things I could discover about. But I think what I ultimately really enjoy about this movie is its unpredictability. Yeah, it definitely feels like a mess. But it's the kind of mess that I can really get into. And that's true of most of these movies that I like to cover. You know, they're really interesting curiosities. The Mario movie is no different. It's just a whole different can of worms. That's the truth.